Welcome everybody to today's webinar, SEM, the Smart Path to Savings in Uncertain Times. Today's webinar will be recorded, and if you have questions throughout the presentation, type them into the questions box and we'll answer them at the end of the presentation. All right, it's now my pleasure to turn it over to CLEAResults SEM subject matter expert, Carrie Macklin, who will introduce us to this presentation.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. We're going to be talking about SEM, Strategic Energy Management, which is the smart path to saving energy in uncertain times. We're going to go over what strategic energy management is. I'm joined by other SEM experts in our company, Pavel Tumakov, Richard Gregg, Glenn De Silva, and Patrick Sipple. And we're going to talk about how where SEM is right now and how we're having kind of record-breaking SEM savings. We're going to go through some success stories, and then we're going to talk a little bit about how utilities can think about SEM, and we'll wrap it up, and there'll be some time for questions. I always want to start with what SEM is. And if those of you who may have seen me present on SEM before, you will be familiar with Sammy the snail. This is my SEM process slide here. SEM is really a continuous cycle of success, continuous cycle of energy savings. It's a process around changing the culture within organizations to energy efficiency, and it focuses mostly on commercial and industrial facilities. So we do a whole process with these organizations. We train the champions within an organization. We create an energy team. We conduct energy scans or treasure hunts. We develop energy models for them. We make those continuous improvements, develop that register of projects, and then we use those projects and those changes to measure and evaluate the success of the organizations. We claim savings through these energy models, through whole building models, and it is key for a lot of utility programs that we run. SEM has become and is becoming one of the biggest savers for these utilities. So we have kind of three mechanisms we use in SEM. We have these collaborative workshops in which we get organizations together in a variety of ways to talk about energy and energy efficiency. We do one-on-one coaching with them. We help them through energy trainings and understanding around energy efficiency. And then finally, we give them very technical engineering services so that if there's any kind of knowledge gap around how to save energy, we'll make sure that they have experts, the technical experts that they need. So that's SEM in a nutshell. This is my kind of quick version of what SEM is, but it's a long process. We spend years with these organizations, at least a year, if not multiple years. Some of our organizations have been with us for almost 8 or more years. So it is a process in which we are truly changing the organization. So this is my 2-minute history of SEM, and it's literally 2 minutes. So I'm going to go through it really fast. So in 2009, SEM really started in the Pacific Northwest. There was a lot of economic instability. If you all remember, there was the financial crisis and everything else. And so we were looking for low-cost operations and maintenance savings, and SEM was developed through that process. Industrial SEM was the first type of program, Pacific Northwest, Ohio, and other places. But commercial really came right on the end after that. That was in 2011. By 2016, so we're jumping ahead a little bit, but CEE did an annual study and found that 324 gigawatt hours and 9 million therms were saved through SEM programs. So it's grown quite a bit since 2009. By 2017, California actually launched an industrial statewide. I'm mentioning this because it's probably the only state that has come out and said, we're doing SEM across the entire state. In 2018, there was a greenhouse gas focus, the first greenhouse gas focus SEM program. It was launched actually in Canada, in Alberta, Canada. moving right along. In 2019, the DOE's 50,001 Ready framework really started to gain adoption. It starts growing, especially in large commercial facilities. The DOE's 50,001 framework is really based on and complementary to the SEM programs that we run. By 2020, we found that 31 of the 52 largest U.S. utilities we're offering SEM to commercial and industrial customers because this is a very ubiquitous program or gaining traction within the U.S. In 2020, we all remember that as well. COVID-19 really disrupted a lot of energy savings programs, and consequently, there was a high demand for SEM's low-cost operations and maintenance persistent savings. 2023, this is when we really started the organizations emerge, but that didn't mean that there was any more disruption or any less disruption. SEM continued to grow in adoption because of the gains that we saw in 2020. And I think we might be missing the last one, but now we're in 2025 and we're seeing similar challenges with economic uncertainty, with projects not going through for capital. And what we're seeing on the flip side for SEM is record-setting savings for that year. Yeah, there it is, 2025, record savings. I'm going to pass it over to Pavel, who's going to talk about our record savings.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Carrie. First, I'd like to start with a state of market. Across nearly every sector, we're seeing a high level of visible uncertainty. Capital funding is paused or significantly delayed. Organizations are reducing staff or limiting outputs. And many teams are operating with a mindset of minimizing risk. In this environment, most customers are looking for ways to maintain performance without making major investments or introducing additional operational risk. And this is exactly the state where SEM continues to excel. Our core thesis here is that SEM performs especially well during periods of uncertainty because the approach inherently minimizes risk. SEM focuses on low and no cost operational and behavioral strategies, activities that don't require capital dollars, but still deliver measurable improvements. For customers dealing with budget freezes or staffing constraints, these are high value, low barrier actions. SEM also helps organizations re-baseline their operations to match current conditions. Whether they're facing reduced occupancy, shifts in production, or changing operational schedules, SEM is a vehicle that provides a framework to recalibrate energy performance in a way that reflects today's realities, not last year's assumptions. Another advantage in uncertain markets is speed. And SEM enables customers to access fast-moving incentives and verify savings sooner than capital programs typically allow. This provides a tangible financial relief at the time when it's needed most, while still supporting those long-term goals of the organizations. And the evidence backs it up. In 2025, CLEAResult recorded a record-setting SEM performance across all of our programs. In the East, West, and Canada regions, we saw all-time highs in savings across every major energy metric, kWh, therm, kW. On top of that, we delivered a record amount of customer incentive dollars, helping those organizations stay financially resilient while improving their operational efficiency. As you can see, the numbers are staggering, with over $13 million distributed as financial reward for energy savings to our customers. In short, when the market becomes uncertain, SEM becomes even more valuable. It's a low risk, cost-effective, and highly responsive strategy that gives customers exactly what they need right now: stability, savings, and support. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Patrick Sipple for a few real-life examples from our California-based programs. Patrick?
Okay, sweet. Good morning, everybody. Patrick Sipple. I'm the Senior Program Manager for 4 large SEM programs that are administered and have program administration run by Southern California Edison. We've got 2 programs that we kicked off at the end of 2023. One oriented towards the public and federal space, and another one oriented towards higher education. Interesting note about the higher education aspect of that, as Carrie mentioned, right, statewide, California does the kind of organizes SCM statewide using the 50,000 ready navigators, kind of a backbone of that. But the higher education program exists for all University of California schools, all California State University schools, and all California community colleges, the 3 different public entities of education in California across the state, across the 4 investor-owned utilities in California. So you see a number of dots spread out across the state, and that's because of the ability for us to implement and give this program, administer SCM across those higher education institutions. On the heels of those, in 2025, we also kicked off in Southern California, Edison territory, commercial program and an industrial and agricultural program. Across all 4 programs to date in the last few years, we were almost at 50 million kilowatt hours and just a touch over 1.2 million therms of savings. We've grown from 0 participants at the start of 23 to 165 and growing every week. And we certainly see a lot of success across the participants that we've had. Again, from the largest of the large industrial down to the smallest of the small cities. It's working across segments, across sectors. I want to highlight 3 different participants that we worked with and kind of had a number of different challenges. First one's an aluminum processor in the Edison territory. They are highly regulated, have a lot of regulatory and tariff constraints that they've been dealing with, especially in this past year, which was their first year in the program. And a lot of uncertainty in the marketplace. They are the supplier for some major aerospace industry players, and there's just been a massive amount of shuffling in that segment. They have very low capital expenditure ability based off of these various economic uncertainties that they have to deal with. And we're really looking for a way to bolster their cost effectiveness and operational effectiveness and save some energy on their utility bill, or save some money on their utility bills. So the engaged team there are keen to improve, and a number of elements that we were able to help them do with their processes, specifically focused on reducing waste and heat loss in their oven systems, and also replacing some compressors that were kind of nearing the end of life, that we definitely could gain some efficiencies there, and you see the savings from them. The college campus, major college campuses in this program down to smaller schools as well. The California colleges are in some significant financial headwinds at this point in time. Each of the campuses severe financial and budgetary constraints. They got very limited capital to spend. A lot of the dollars that they would spend are already earmarked for new construction or projects that aren't necessarily related to energy efficiency, energy reduction. And so the over 49, I think last date, we're at 51 campuses across the state enrolled in the program, and they're kind of off at this boat. But this campus in particular, a lot of different actions that they took over the course of the first year in the program, 68 specifically active projects, things that we were able to help them do, from just very basic HVAC tune-ups to larger systems that could take their building management systems and their control systems that they had in place and really leverage the expertise of our team. And they had a really successful first year in the program. And then the casino operations, actually three different casino properties that are in our public energy performance program. They've seen a really significant amount of turnover in their own facilities teams. They were dealing with a number of operational changes that were being implemented kind of from a casino tribal government decisions on down to the casino, and really increased the need for their HVAC demand. Obviously, they're in customer satisfaction is their number one priority for those properties. And with all that combined, there was a lot of headwind there as well. But they're actually in year 3 of this program and have had wild success, seeing significant savings year over year and continuing to really take advantage of the expertise and the savings from the SCN program. So yeah, overall across the SC programs, great examples of success even with challenging times, both externally and internally. And with that, I'm going to kick over to my colleague Richard Gregg.
Thank you, Patrick. Hello, everyone. So my name is Richard Gregg. I'm an SEM program manager, and I will talk about one of the larger SEM programs that we are working on for Entergy Arkansas. So SEM fits into one of two different categories for Entergy Arkansas. They have two separate programs that include all the different measures, and SEM is one of those measures. So it's one of the things that customers can participate in, and they can get incentives from Entergy Arkansas. And so they also call it CEI, just kind of a special flavor of SEM. So you'll see those used interchangeably throughout. And so you can see that we're delivering a very large amount of the program savings in each of these two programs. So one of them is large C&I, focused on commercial and industrial. So we have all different kind of industrial facilities in there. We have different commercial facilities, even retail, and we have a total of 15 different sectors that we're working with. And then within their City Smart program, so that is schools and government, that is universities, we have community colleges, we have K through 12 schools, different things like that. We also have some cities and some county governments that we're working with. And so this is one of those programs that has been going on for almost 7 years, and we have grown to almost 80 participants. You can see they're spread very well across Arkansas there. So going to the next slide, we will talk about the progression of how SEM CEI has gone. So you can see, again, just like Patrick, we started a few years ago with 0. So we went from 0% of these programs to now 55% of the large C&I program, and then almost 25% of the City Smart program. And you can see over the years, the number of participants and the savings that we're delivering for Entergy Arkansas have really increased. And going back to what Pavel and Carrie were talking about, you can see that even throughout different challenges that our participants have experienced, we've actually seen the savings increase and go up over time as they have joined the program and stayed in the program for Entergy Arkansas. So with 2021 there, you can see that was a particularly high year for us. A lot of participants joined that year. I think we had 30 join within a span of about 6 months. And so there was a very large spike there around 2020 and 2021 that fell into those savings. And then moving on to 2025, we're going to zoom in and talk about kind of what we've seen just in the last year. So we have a lot of wood manufacturing facilities that we're working with in Arkansas, and they tend to be very affected by different economic conditions. Some years they have extremely high production, and then there's kind of no time to do capital projects. We have other periods of time where their production is very low. I've got one participant, the one on the left there. There was periods of time in the 6 years that I've been working with them that they were working 4 days a week, sometimes 7 days a week, sometimes 1 day a week. And so in 2025, particularly difficult year for them, the plant manager, you can see the quote there on the screen, he said that we won't be able to do anything that they have to do except to keep the facility running. So they had 0 capital budget in 2025. Despite these challenges though, and you'll see this across all three, their savings tremendously went up 236% there in 2025. And so with these ups and downs, working through SEM, we're able to work with them, and they know that they can't do these capital projects. So they want to focus on saving money because production is down. They have kind of additional opportunities because now there's more time to turn off equipment. There's more time that the equipment can be off and different things like that. And then moving to the middle there, another very impressive large number. So they nearly doubled their savings between 2024 and 2025. In this case, they had another unique opportunity. Their production was up so much that they were able to not focus on capital projects because they kind of didn't have time to shut down and do those projects. And so because of that, something else that happened was they were concerned about how much longer this was going to last, just the ongoing uncertainty. They actually let the Energy Champion go. And most of the time, they don't get replaced. Many times, just because they're uncertain of how things are going to go, they don't replace the Energy Champion, which is the main person that is focused on energy management for the site. And so I had to make several in-person visits and kind of try to keep them on track, get them back on track. And so because they were focused on additional cost savings, they were able to increase their savings. And specifically, they were able to do one major project that we had been talking about and thinking about for a few years. They were finally able to do it because it was just the right time to do it. So moving to the right there, the third opportunity there was with the sawmill. So again, we have many sawmills that we're working with in Arkansas. In 2025, they had a completely limited capital budget. There were a lot of projects that they had put into corporate that they wanted to do. all of them were pushed out. And so because of that, they were able to focus more on SEM. Again, in this case, by focusing more on SEM, they were able to do more projects that we had pushed off in the past. Because they were able to focus more, they had more time to focus on that. They were able to get more people involved. There was a more emphasis on cost savings. So you can see in all three of these opportunities, they have increased their savings significantly despite these challenges, whether production was very low or very high, and the energy champion leaving and different things like that. So with that, I will turn it over to Glenn De Silva, and he will tell us about what we're doing in Canada.
Thanks, Richard. I'm Glenn De Silva, and I'm an SEM coach in the BC region. And I want to share what we have achieved together with our utilities here in British Columbia, BC Hydro, and Fortis BC through our strategic energy management codes. So these codes represent mostly industrial participants and in a variety of different sectors: manufacturing, food and beverage, fisheries, forestry, chemical processing, agriculture, and transportation. And with these different sectors, the different operational realities, but all navigating in the same broader economic climate, right? In 2024, our participants delivered over 25 million kilowatt hours in reported energy savings, and in 2025, that increased to more than 28 million kilowatt hours. So a 12% year-on-year improvement on the electric side. And on the natural gas side, our participants delivered over 200,000 gigajoules, which increased to 252,000 gigajoules in 2025, and that is a 26% increase. Now, all these results came from 4 active SEM codes representing 40 electricity participants and 25 natural gas participants all across BC, as you can see in the map, in the mainland and the Vancouver Islands. And then what was important here is the context that these savings were achieved during a period of shifting markets, supply changes, and growing tariff impacts. Now, what we noticed, like I said, with increased uncertainty, as the margins tightened, attention towards energy management sharpened. Across sectors, uncertainty showed up in different ways: cost volatility, tariffs, production swings, peak demand pressures, etc. And then one example that really stood out for us is Okanagan Spring Brewery. And in early 2025, they were navigating through significant cost pressures driven by 25% to 50% tariffs on aluminum cans that were first being sent across the border from Canada. So that was one tariff. And then when those cans were sent back after manufacturing, they were also affected by the retaliatory tariffs. So almost like a double whammy here. And because of that, their packaging costs increased sharply, and that quickly became a business issue for them. So in situations like these, energy management can either get deprioritized or become part of the solution. But at Okanagan Spring Brewery, we worked with the site to reframe what it means, what energy savings meant for them. So energy meetings started becoming more focused. The SEM culture started growing on the site. Energy management discussions strengthened, and then we had a bigger team now showing up to the SEM coaching calls, to the monthly meetings. And then what they did is they took what they learned to daily operational conversations on the floor. What we also did was we created collaborative spaces within our cohort so that they could learn from each other during workshops to identify roadblocks, particularly around peak demand management, because that is something we noticed that across the board, many participants are struggling with. Now, participants showed that during these workshops, we learned from different participants, and then they showed or they demonstrated to each other how they could sequence better the equipment, adjust schedules, and talk about different drivers during the workshops. Now, the site took all this information, and then they were able to reduce their peak demand by about 25%. And then just by carrying out regular low-cost, no-cost savings, low-cost, no-cost energy conservation measures like fixing compressed air leaks, fixing steam leaks, fixing their own steam insulation, improving the set points. They were able to save about 3,900 gigajoules in natural gas, which is about 7.6% for them, and 340,000 kilowatt hours in electric savings, which is about 4.1%. So this was something that we observed across the board. This is a consistent theme across all our cohorts. And what we've seen was that in uncertain times, capital is often constrained, but operational improvement is always available. And that shift in mindset is what allowed sites like Okanagan Spring to stay engaged even during this tariff pressures. So the takeaway message here for us that was that uncertainty didn't slow down participation, but it rather strengthened it. So with that, I'll pass it over to Kerry.
Great, thank you. Yeah, these are just a couple of the really exciting stories. I just love hearing about all the different participants. I think Pavel on his slide talked about just how many participants that CLEAResult is working with, and then if you kind of extrapolate across all SEM programs, there's thousands of organizations that SEM has benefited. There's a couple of things I wanted to pick out of those presentations, just to kind of really put a fine point. The first one in California, the ramp up in California is truly astonishing. As Patrick was talking about, it's only been a couple of years. 2023 is when they started. They went from 0 in 23, and that was really the first year. So nobody was signed up or working on this, to 49 million kWh by 2025. A lot of that is new participations, right? So that in that program, we had to get a lot of new participants in, but it is staggering that we were able to go from 0 to 49 million and 1.2 million therms in that short amount of time. The other point I wanted to make on the Arkansas program, just to again kind of emphasize the point that Richard was making, is that in Arkansas, in Entergy Arkansas, in 2020, when that program kind of got off the ground, the SEM program, they were of course at 0% of the program, and now they're at 55% of the savings in that program is coming from SEM. So imagine if at your utility you're not doing an SEM program, you could increase your savings by somewhere, by 55% if you're as successful as Arkansas. So really an amazing ramp up there and continued huge amount of savings every year. And then in BC, I also wanted to point out that the graphs that Glenn was talking about, where he was showing the participants between 24 and 25, and there were no new participants. So in California, when we were looking at all those new participants coming in and lots of savings from them, in BC, they were not new participants. These are folks that have been working in SEM for years, and yet they were able to increase their savings 24%, which is really, or there was a couple of percentages in there, 26%, I guess, in gas, and what was it? I have it over here. 12%, I think, in energy savings and in electricity. So without adding new participants, they were able to really increase. And that was just getting deeper savings, more savings from the current participants, despite most capital and prescriptive and other projects having a hard time in 25 because of the tariffs and other things. SEM had a record year. So that's kind of what I want you all to take away from this. Obviously, there's kind of the bullets around how SEM is working, but it really does create, SEM as a program creates this very repeatable, persistent amount of savings that can ramp up and produce kind of in-year savings at amazing results. Okay, so now we have 15 minutes for questions. If you all have any questions over any of the information that we went over today, please go ahead and put that in your questions panel. There's a couple of questions coming in already. But if you'd like to submit more questions, our coaches are here to answer any questions you may have. So go ahead and do that, and I'll kind of go through the questions. So the first question can be for any of the coaches, but it's about how often we arrange workshops. So I know that each of our programs do things slightly different, but maybe you guys can talk a little bit about the workshops and the kind of like trainings and how often you do that for the programs. We can start with Richard. Let's start in Arkansas.
Yeah, I can take that question and start us off. So for the first year for participants, we do 5 foundational workshops, and that has been the typical status for them. For participants that have been in for 6 or 7 years, we do, like I mentioned, have turnover. So last year, I think I stopped counting when like 3/4 of our energy champions left for various reasons. And so the organization is not new to SEM, but the energy champion is. They also expand their energy team. And so we do invite them to those foundational workshops because we're continuing to add participants so they can come to the workshop for the new participants. And it's a new experience for those individuals. For we call them alumni participants, they go to 2 or 3 more advanced kind of workshops. And we really think every year and do a lot of surveys for participants and find out what they're interested in. Again, SEM is kind of a moving target. So depending on the market, depending on what things are going on, we will do very different workshops for them.
Yeah, I'll take it from California's perspective, right? Everything's pretty standardized across the state. There's a certain number of we call educational modules, and they can be delivered one-on-one to a participant, or they can be delivered in more cohort style, virtually and or in person. So we kind of combine that effect based off of the needs of the participant, the needs of the participating customer, right? What would be the best suited for them, right? If we have a kind of one-off industrial player that needs more technical kind of focused content, that might be a one-off, more virtual. Whereas if we have content that's for everybody and that everyone would be able to benefit from, do that more as a group workshop. Our last in-person workshop, I think I beat my record. We got 95+% score from that workshop. So that was in person. There's 60 different customer representatives there, and they all had a blast. So I think it was mostly just the food. Just kidding. The content was great too.
Yeah, I mean, it does vary because of the different groups of customers, but as Patrick says, say across the board, we try to do in person and webinars and all the other ways to get them together. Glenn, any differences in BC than what Richard and Patrick said?
Just echoing here, similar to what Richard and Patrick said, depending on where the participants are in their SEM journey. Typically, when we begin with, we'll have them participate in about 3 to 4 workshops in the first year. And then for the alumni participants who've been part of the program 6 or 7 years, mostly catering to their needs, mostly technical workshops where they can brainstorm with each other, come together. In our last celebration workshop, which was kind of had a really mostly of a technical flavor to it, we had about 50 participants attending in person, which was a great success. So similar kind of thing.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And maybe I'll hit on that second part of the question, which is talking about how long does it take for some of the participants to adopt some of the best practices and upgrades that are required. And really that, it's kind of a 0 to 60 across all of our participants, depending on the measures, right? We sometimes work with school districts or kind of commercial facilities that have building management systems or SCADA systems that we're able to audit, and those improvements, those actions can be taken live as we are working with them to review those systems and find opportunities within those systems, whether it's scheduling equipment differently, or there's heating and cooling going at the same time, or inefficiencies within the systems at the same time. So those could happen right away. And a lot of times they are literally no cost improvements. Those are upgrades or changes that could happen live on the system. And then it's a broad spectrum. SEM is known to be that low to no cost program. That is the bread of the program. We are interested to find participants, to find opportunities for participants that are easier to implement. And so sometimes those are, it takes a month or two or several months to get those done. If there are contractors required, some of the capital improvement or some coordination within the facilities, or maybe some additional spend that's required to offer those upgrades to equipment. Sometimes those takes a little bit longer, right? But for the most part, the beauty of the program is in that we attempt to find easiest path to savings and help participants kind of see the way they use energy.
Yeah, on average across the programs, we see first year savings between 3 and 5% across the board. And it varies by type. We keep very close track of the type of organizations and how they're doing, but the savings comes in the first year. We do typically in SEM, and I'm sort of answering another question that was in here, which is around how quickly. Well, you mentioned the how quickly, but one question in the chat is, do the projects typically occur over multiple years, or does it take more than a year to complete it? And if so, how is that managed with annual program budgets and such? The answer to that is, we typically have savings every year in SEM. And the savings occurs in the first year, and that's that 3 to 5%. There are this is an operations maintenance behavioral type program, so there is momentum that builds, and there is changes from one year to the next. And so you will see one year the savings will be really good, really high, and the next year the incremental savings won't be as big, but then you'll have a huge project that they've been working on, and the year 3 is their biggest year. So it really depends on what's going on at the facility, but we definitely see annual savings year over year. The second part of that question was on kind of annual targets or budgets. I don't know, Glenn, Patrick, maybe you start with Patrick. How do you guys deal with kind of planning for annual budgets in utility programs, your annual savings that you're trying to hit in targets?
So our annual budgets in terms
of basically you'll have a target from the utility that you're trying to hit. Right. And I think the question is around, how do you deal with those annual targets? And what are your strategies for hitting those annual targets?
Yeah, I mean, the more the merrier, right? As you increase the size of the program, you're able to kind of lean on averages, law of averages to extract that.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's once we dial in, we get coaches more intimately familiar with anyone, the customers, participants, operations, right? You start to figure out, like, okay, yeah, this is going to be a big saver, or this is going to have mediocre savings, and obviously scale of the participant, right? I've had at least 3 participants save over 30% in their first year, and that came from HVAC scheduling, like something that is kind of like what, but they were just literally running their systems full tilt since COVID. Some of them are literally hardwired with alligator clips, HVAC units to just be running constant. And so you make these discoveries and you say, okay, this is gonna be a big saver. And so that you just kind of have to, as we get to know the customers more, each coach kind of is able to dial that in, and we roll that up to a program level to kind of track towards those goals.
The question states that there's a cohort element to the offering. How are we dealing with the privacy concerns for some of those customers? And the one thing that SEM program is great for is what we're trying to do is we're trying to change cultures within those organizations, right? And so the one common denominator between all organizations, whether it's school districts, industrial facilities, or other organizations, are people. People are the common denominator, right? And so the workshops that we present and things that we try to get people to to adhere to are related to people taking action in the energy best practices, right? This is education and having them commit to those changes within their organizations, and people are required to do those changes, right? So typically, the secret sauce isn't necessarily the concern for most of our customers. There are ways to, obviously we sometimes require some data to be compiled, but we can sterilize that data, make sure it's not confidential. But for engagement in SEM activities and for running the program, it's all about people, and that's the one common bond in every workshop that we see.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it is funny that question about whether or not people share in these workshops have been around since that first cohort in 2009. In fact, that was one of the things that they said was like that they being, I don't know, people who were skeptical of the program, nobody's going to talk to each other because it's competitive, and especially in the industrial sector. But we don't see that at all. In fact, they in the industrial sector, they talk to each other more. It seems like, they're able to share what they want. We're never forcing them. It's never like you must tell us about this piece of proprietary equipment. It is always whatever they feel like they want to share. And what we find, of course, as Pavel said, is that there's a lot of very similar equipment that is not proprietary in any way, and also they're happy to share what they've learned. And so it's really been a very uplifting program in that way too. Okay, well, we only have a minute and a half left. There's a number of questions in the chat about cost effectiveness. And that question, of course, depending on the location and the utility itself, it varies widely depending on how they measure and everything else. But I would say typically SEM is if not one of the most cost-effective programs that utilities run. I don't know, Glenn, Richard, or Patrick, do any of you have any thoughts on kind of in your particular utility, how cost effectiveness, where
I'll just say
SEM
this
stacks up?
really fast, and I'll let Glenn, Richard, but a quote from someone that we work with at Edison. I haven't seen a program this cost effective in over 10, 15 years. Literally, that was the programs there. And he wasn't not a believer, but like after her first year delivering one of those 4 programs, he was like, I haven't seen something this cost effective in
yeah, that's a great quote. Glenn, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. I'd like to chime in. Yeah, that's similar to what Patrick said. We get that from our customers quite a bit. The initial hesitancy is because, maybe this is not cost effective for us. But then later on, when they see the bill cost savings, it's a no-brainer for them. And then that belief takes sometimes years, a couple of years, maybe 2 years, but sometimes few months.
Okay, well, I think we're at time. If there's any questions that are left in the chat, we will follow up. We had a lot of questions, so thank you for engaging. We'll follow up with you separately. And if you want any more information on the SEM programs that we, or the SEM program at CLEAResult, you can use that QR code there. And thank you guys so much for joining us in this webinar.
Thank you all.